Okay, great. Welcome everyone to Advancing Accessory Dwelling Units and Community Engagement in the City of Arvin, California. My name is Haley Osser-Zelaya, and I'm the Communications Manager here at CivicWell, formerly the Local Government Commission. Today's event is the first of our new webinar series highlighting CivicWell's collaborative projects. Each event will bring together a representative from a local government or community agency along with a staff member from CivicWell, and in this case, a fellow from our CivicSpark AmeriCorps program, to walk through the ins and outs of the work and inspire the types of projects that can be possible within your own communities. So as we launch these series, the events are going to be open to all, but eventually these will be exclusively for our CivicWell members who also receive event discounts, policy action alerts, resources, and information about funding opportunities. So we do encourage you to take a look at civicwell.org/membership to learn more, and hope you'll join our member network. A couple items. If you have questions during the presentation, please place those in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. CivicWell staff will be facilitating the Q&A at the end of the presentation. And please keep in mind that we probably won't be able to answer questions that are specific to one city only. So do try to keep the questions a little bit more general so that they can be inclusive for our full audience. Okay, I'm going to take a couple minutes and just introduce our speakers today. Lizzy Havey has served as a CivicSpark Fellow with the City of Arvin for 2 years, helping the planning department on a number of projects and programs. Prior to joining CivicSpark, she graduated from San Diego State University with a bachelor's degree in social work and a specialization in environmental social work and community engagement. Christine Viterelli has worked as the grant specialist at the City of Arvin since 2016, helping the city attain millions of dollars in awards from federal, state, and other jurisdictional agencies. She has been a site supervisor for 2 new fellows onboarding in Arvin for, She's been a site supervisor for CivicSpark Fellows for 3 years and has plans for 2 new fellows onboarding for the 2022 to 2023 fiscal year. And among other honors, Christine has been a recipient of the Kern Council for Government's Regional Award of Merit for Transportation. And finally, Mackenzie Bolger is the CivicSpark Senior Manager for the CivicWell National Service Team. She joined CivicWell as a staff member in 2016 after serving as a CivicSpark Fellow herself. Mackenzie, I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Cool. So I think today we're going to be talking through a variety of things. Thanks for the intro, Haley. So we're going to be talking a little bit, I'll just give a brief overview about CivicSpark and the program as a whole. And then Lizzy's really going to dive into what she accomplished in her project this year. And Christine will be discussing that as well. And then we'll talk a little bit more about how CivicSpark could potentially support the efforts you're undertaking in your community. And then we'll have some time for questions at the end. All right, so as Haley mentioned, CivicSpark is an AmeriCorps program. We've been operating in California since 2014, and we've actually this year we'll be expanding into Washington State and Colorado as well. Our goal as a program is really to contribute towards more resilient, equitable, and vibrant communities across the states we serve in. And I'll dive into our mission a little bit in the next slide. So our mission is really threefold. We focus primarily on building local public sector capacity to address a variety of issues, from environmental issues to affordable housing issues, which we'll talk about today. And we also aim to serve as a social purpose career accelerator for future leaders, so advancing the career opportunities for the fellows who serve in our program. And then through all of our work, fostering lasting and authentic community engagement with the communities we serve. So that's a bit about CivicSpark, just to provide the umbrella big picture overview. But from there, I'll let Lizzy kind of dive into what she was specifically working on.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Lizzy Havey, and I've been with the City of Arvin for the last 2 years as a CivicSpark Fellow. I want to give a little bit of background of the City of Arvin. I think it provides a good context of the rest of the presentation. So the City of Arvin, it's about 15 miles southeast of Bakersfield in South Kern County. We have a small population, about 21,000 people. We are a rural incorporated city, so we are surrounded by agriculture and different farmland. And the city itself and the communities within the City of Arvin are AB 1550 low-income communities, and we do experience air pollution and water quality issues. We are also a disadvantaged community. The city staff, we are minimal, we're strong but mighty. With one city planner and Christine as the grants manager and a number of other city staff that I've worked with to get these programs forward. So minimal staff and staff capacity. But really I want to focus today on CivicSpark in the whole. I'm going to talk about capacity building. That's one of our core activities as a CivicSpark Fellow. So today we're going to start with capacity building, the ADU program. Next, we'll talk about volunteer engagement and professional development, all important features of the CivicSpark program. And I'll touch later on the volunteer engagement briefly with a little short case study, and Christine will be able to talk about professional development. So today for ADUs, I came on 2 years ago and I've worked on a number of different programs. So I'm going to focus now on the housing work. We had one big program that we've been facilitating ADUs and facilitating high density development. We're going to focus just on ADUs today, and I'll get a little bit more into why. For this program, I'm going to set up the steps that we had. So it was attain funds, research and review, program design, technical documents, implement and coordinate, and we'll talk about that next. So overall, the overarching high-level goals for the ADU program was to spur ADU development in the City of Arvin, given the context of the city. We want to facilitate affordable housing options for residents and multi-generational families living in the same household. In total for the program, and we've been working with consultants, so no, this wasn't just me working on this. You'll see that we want to update our ADU ordinance. So the ADU ordinance really established a precedent for ADU development to facilitate the building and construction of accessory dwelling units or granny flats, however you want to call that, in the city's zoning code. So we want to get up to par with the state statutory requirements and then also incentivize residents and spur that development. The next step was internal policy and procedure. This is a core task in our ADU program. What that really is working with our consultants essentially on how the city will go by permitting the ADUs and the processes and procedures the building inspector will follow in order to permit and improve an ADU development. We want to make sure that this is going to be a great program for our residents. So we obviously need some type of processing guide, guidelines for how do we get this off the ground? What is an ADU? What types of ADUs can you build? Which are mentioned below, detached, attached, or junior ADUs. What are the necessary requirements and steps to building the ADU, and what are the financing options, lastly? And then the very last piece is permit-ready ADUs. So these will be floor plans and plan sets for 3 different types of ADUs that we will provide for residents. So if they have this floor plan or plan set, it's already permitted and ready to go. They just need to submit the application and they can go ahead and move forward in the process. So really eliminating those barriers and streamlining the process. Those plan sets will provide various square footage choices, exterior elevation choices, and then again, for detached, attached, or attached and junior ADUs. So those are the big overarching goals and deliverables of the ADU program. So now we're going to get more into the steps of how do we get there. What I like to say is step 0 is attain funds, of course. So this was prior to me joining the City of Arvin and CivicSpark. Basically, we had these funding, which was SB2 and local early action planning funding from the Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD. That really allowed this program to move forward. So again, those applications were submitted prior to my time with general goals outlined. The LEAP funding itself is what provided the funding for the ADUs. So I'm just going to focus on the LEAP funding, which was a total of $150,000 awarded late 2020. It covered the cost for my time in the City of Arvin, consultants to include those pre-approved plan sets from an architect, as well as staff time for a city planner and city engineer. So it's really important to understand the reason and the legislation and the backwork of this funding source to help inspire the goals of the program and the program design, which we'll get into. But I want to talk about the supplemental funding. I'm not an expert in this area of the supplemental funding, but it's important for, I think, cities and counties and jurisdictions to consider to know what other types of funding is available. So we were additionally awarded the Permanent Local Housing Allocation, PLHA funding. We used the first funding, the first year of funding for COVID-19 mortgage and rent relief, but we actually in turn are working with self-help enterprises for a forgivable loan program for ADU construction for our residents. And that is going to be, I believe, income, certified. And then next, we want to talk about the Cal HFA ADU grant program, which is additionally for low to medium income earners. And it's up to $40,000 for pre-development costs for homeowners. So again, I'm not an expert in this. The city will be looking to self-help enterprises as well as directing homeowners to Cal HFA for those programs. And then lastly, CivicWell runs a funding navigation program at fundingresource.org that brings together funding sources and technical assistance for local government. So you can always look for new emerging funds that can supplement this program. And we can go into the next step. So after attaining the funds, understanding the funds, I really dived in deep into the research and review. I wanted to review the various funds, receive what are those housing priorities, what has been used or what hasn't been used, and what grants have implementation deadlines that definitely kind of supported our work or helped move it forward. Understanding the legislation and the funding allocation, and also researching the statutory requirements for what's allowable, what is the purpose of moving ADUs forward. So the HCD ADU handbook has been a great research to me. You can find everything that you want regarding ADUs from the get-go. You'll see model cities and comparable cities that I then did more research on. The city of Clovis is most comparable to the city of Arvin, given that it's a Central Valley community. It's up north a little bit, but it has a similar size. And they have a really great program called the Cottage Home Program that we were able to kind of look at, see where it was at, and we actually got to visit too, and visit the city of Clovis and see an example ADU that they have, which is in their alleyways, which the city of Arvin has similar alleyways to the city of Clovis. We also looked at the city of Santa Cruz and city of San Diego for fee structures, parking minimums, all those other side details. So what was important that we saw cities that were comparable to ours, but then also just best practices for other California cities and jurisdictions. Other resources I wanted to mention are California ADU. That is a program from UC Berkeley. And then we also have Casita Coalition and the Turner Center, which is another center of UC Berkeley that are producing great resources, all regarding ADUs, ADU development, ADU scorecards. So they're looking at different jurisdictions' ordinances and rating them from grade A to grade F based off a number of different requirements and how they're meeting state goals and priorities. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So next is program design. You saw at the bottom of the last slide, the previous slide, something talking about the San Joaquin Valley Regional Early Action Planning, or SJV REAP. That was a very influential resource for me in this ADU, developing this ADU program, specifically in this step of program design. It was a regional valley-wide collaborative focusing on planning, capacity building, and helping different jurisdictions throughout the valley on a number of different housing topics. And specifically, I found their ADU resources and webinars to be very useful, and that was very key in the planning of this design. So the main 3 program design elements that I want to talk about, and that the San Joaquin Valley REAP also mentioned, was updating your ADU ordinance. So the ADU ordinance, according to HCD and legislation shaping the statutory requirements around ADUs, should encourage the development of ADUs. So whether you recently updated your ADU a couple years ago just to meet the minimum requirements, or you haven't updated any area and have a really antiquated zoning code just like we do, that's going to be key to moving things forward, and that's the baseline. If what's next, if you have staff capacity and the funding, is developing the pre-approved plans in consideration of your community. So having those are really easy. Having them be permit ready streamlines the process. It allows residents to have various floor plans and different choices to go ahead, pick their ADUs, and then they can go on with the development, and it's less back and forth between the city and the residents. It's important to note many cities who have pursued ADU programs already have pre-approved plans as well, and will have those floor plans available for the public. So you can see examples of additionally on the HCD ADU webpage, those different available plan sets that you can also look into. And lastly is implementing the ADU program. What does it all detail? So again, these are the 3 main elements, but to implement the ADU program is really where you go into the program design. So I would recommend a processing guide. So having something for homeowners and residents to look at, a complete guidebook of what is an ADU, how do you get one off the ground, and what's the city's role, and what's the permitting and fee structures and whatnot. It's also important to provide technical assistance. So, having a dedicated staff member that's going to be there to answer questions at ADU, or is the local ADU expert, which might be a number of building inspectors or maybe a planner in your office. And then lastly, I think it's pretty important in the processing guide in general to be aware of the financial assistance and also the general costs. There's a number of ADU calculators out there you can tailor to your jurisdiction or regional wide, but you can also just have general ideas, and then also what type of loans and things are available, just to provide people more and more information. Later program design discussions that we've been working with our consultant would be, what are the parking minimums? Do we have ADU checklists and readiness documents? Just a 1-pager of this is exactly what you need. And then also looking at the various fee structures. Can you lower or minimum fees in certain areas to incentivize building ADUs? So the second element of program design is a little bit more on the aesthetics and marketing and demographics of your personal community. For Arvin, I wanted to put this up here because I think it was a really important just data that we needed to look at. So our average household size in Arvin is 4.48 people compared to the rest of California, the state, which is 2.9. So we have very large households and multi-generational households too. So in marketing this program, the ADU program, we want to consider how can we market this to multi-generational working families. And a lot of times that'll be grandparents living with the families, or maybe a new family, maybe there's a new baby in the family. So that's important to consider. So how can we basically have our households be less overcrowded and provide more space for new families or grandparents that are living at home too? So that's kind of the marketing strategy we're going into with our ADU program. And additionally, how to incentivize programs for low to medium income homeowners and households. Let me go to the next slide. So I like to talk about this area as bureaucracy at work. This is what it takes to actually move the program forward. Taking the funding off the shelves, taking the research and review, the general program design that you made, and making it into reality, which is all those technical steps, right? So what I did was taking those program design elements that I was hoping to see in our request for proposal. And so that included updating the ordinance, having a processing guide, It also included other areas that we lumped together funds, but again, for the ADUs, it was also updating our zoning code about ADUs and including those pre-approved plans and floor plans in the actual document. So it was a request for proposal, which is our SB2 and LEAP implementation. And then really from there, it's just staff coordination. It's proposal scoring, it's staff reports, resolutions, and contracts in order to move that forward, and really putting an eye to timeliness. How can we do this as fast as possible with the most accuracy? So working with the legal team on the different contracts and the request for proposal, making sure everything's set. You'll see on the right, that's the request for proposal we had from Precision Civil Engineering, and that's who we ended up going with for this program. We can go to the next slide, thank you. So the very last step is implementing and coordinating. So this is providing the organizational capacity for the city. So right now we're still in the process of this ADU program and this SB2 LEAP implementation. But what's most importantly is having a designated staff for program coordination and management. A CivicSpark Fellow is a great example. This is primarily my work coordinating with the consultants, keeping my site supervisor and our city planner in the loop and asking them for different resources that I might need to allow us to move forward. The consultants, you want to make sure you're working with consultants who are providing the bare minimum, because city staff and city programs are hard to run, and there's minimal staff capacity because there's always staff wearing multiple hats. So really they should provide work programs, agendas, they should be providing timelines and also suggestions as needed. We really worked with our consultants to make sure, allow them to be the experts in this process and seeing, okay, this is what we talked about in our proposal. How can we expand on that? Is that something the city needs to take on, or is that included in the proposal itself? So really identifying and filling those additional gaps in successful program implementation. So marketing brochures beyond just the processing guide, finance resourcing, and then any other internal permitting barriers that we as a staff need to work on and evaluate. So again, that's how do we incentivize residents for this program, and how can we provide the organizational capacity to move this forward? So right now, our current status is that we are still in the implementation phase. We are working on the other half of this program for high density development, and ADUs have taken a bit of a back burner. We had a couple kickoff meetings about the ADUs, but that'll be starting soon, and so it'll be after my time with CivicSpark that the ADU program is really going to get off the ground and running. So luckily we have another CivicSpark Fellow coming in. The projections for the program is that hopefully in the next 2 years, we will be able to have the ADU program up and running and have residents already submitting applications for ADU construction. So anywhere from 2 to 7 built a year would be ideal for the City of Arvin, and hopefully more as well. So that's the current status of the ADU program. I'm excited for where it's going to go, and the new CivicSpark Fellow going to taking that on in terms of the marketing and some of the other technical aspects. The greatest challenge in this ADU program itself has been the way that city governments run sometimes, which is a bit slower, and also just becoming the expert in this field myself, really diving into the research and review. And I think in the future, I'm excited to work with the residents and see what improvements that we can make on the ADU program itself. So that was capacity building in the City of Arvin. That's the main activity of a CivicSpark Fellow. I'm going to transition now to talk a little bit more about a second core activity, which is volunteer engagement. And a key piece of volunteer engagement is the community outreach, the public engagement. So I'm going to give a quick example of a case study that we had. So last year we had Christine and I, the grants manager, who you'll be hearing from soon, worked on the Prop 68 statewide parks program. She did a lot of the grant writing and worked with our city engineer. I did more of the research and community engagement, so not getting into the funding too much, but researching the guidelines, understanding what the city needed to do, and then planning community engagement events. How can we make our parks better? How can we renovate our parks? The City of Arvin in 2020 had shut down some of the city operations and park maintenance. And so at this point, we were hearing a lot of city feedback or public feedback about the state of our parks and being in really poor conditions and not being safe for their children and residents. So we had a number of meetings. Before my time at CivicSpark, we had even more in-person meetings starting in 2018 and 2019. So really holistic, well-run program of surveys and 10 virtual public engagement events. We also, once the application was submitted, we were able to work with somebody from the Departments of Park and Recreation for a site visit. And I was able to clarify all the needed areas of equity and community engagement, and what were the public comments on our parks, and how did they want the parks to be renovated and designed? What are the different design features, such as adding volleyball courts, taking down a outside fence that seemed like a barrier to accessing the parks, improving the Little League field that's going to be on there. And so luckily, you can go to the next slide, Skylar. Through that whole process, we were awarded the $10 million in funds to renovate Kavakovich Park. And a key required element of CivicSpark for CivicSpark Fellows is a volunteer engagement project. So what we did was to celebrate these upcoming park renovations and the funding. I used this project to support a local community-based organization, which was the Arvin Little League. So our key partners was the City of Arvin, of course. We worked with the Public Works Department for getting a number of tools, and we also got approved for water and snacks and some food. The Arvin Little League and the mayor's office was key, having that political will and having supporters come out. So we were able to have over 100 volunteers, 400 plus hours of direct service, and a great community building exercise where we talked to the residents. We told them, we listened to you. We applied for this grant. We won the grant. Let's celebrate. And prior to these park renovations, we want to make sure the Little League field is going to be safe for children playing in the season. So it led to a cleaner, safer Kavakovich Park and a great opportunity for people to come together and volunteer for the city. So that's the second activity of CivicSpark. It's a very small percentage of the CivicSpark Fellows time. You majority are doing capacity building work, my ADU program, for example. And next, I'll let Christine talk about and share information on the last core activity of CivicSpark, which is professional development.
Thank you, Lizzie. And I will tell you all, I'm very sad to see her go, but it's time. She's sort of outgrown Arvin, I believe. So let's switch to topics a little bit and talk about the benefits to the host and the site supervisor. So I was Lizzie's direct site supervisor for the City of Arvin. And there are multiple benefits. If you're a city organization or governmental organization outside and you need extra help, this is a phenomenal program. So how it benefited Arvin specifically is it added staff capacity. There is only one of me. There's only one grants manager and one grant person in the grants department. So, you know, we have limited staff, and having an additional support and capacity builder within the city was a huge benefit to our community. It also involves a limited term financial investment. So typically, if you're paying for the cost of the CivicSparker, it's an 11-month term. And so it allows you to really focus on special projects. It instantaneously will be able to expand your ability to do research and outreach with the community. And the fellow brings really fresh ideas and innovations to your community. Also, too, I found that Lizzie was very helpful with assisting in organization and meeting coordination. So perhaps I was really busy on preparing a grant application, but we knew we had some outreach to do, or we had a public engagement opportunity. I could assign her that, and then she would be able to create the organization and meeting and calendar and send out the reminders and function independently. So that was very helpful. But there are also very many benefits to this program for the fellow. First of all, an incoming fellow will get direct exposure to local government or a government agency. They have an enormous professional workforce experience. It's a great resume builder. I can tell you that when people see CivicSpark on your resume, it really can skyrocket you, especially if you're interested in the future career in government. And it also adds to your overall job experience. Let's talk a little bit about the role of the site supervisor. So initially, the site supervisor typically prepares the application for the CivicSpark program and conducts the interview of candidates. If you're working within multiple departments, for example, this year we were going to need a CivicSpark person for our housing department and community development. So then I would also include members of that department in the interview process because it's important that they have that relationship with a potential fellow candidate. So the site supervisor also assigns projects, conducts weekly check-ins with the fellow, checks in on projects, conducts fellow site assessments throughout the year, and communicates with the CivicWell regional coordinators and planners. In addition, I'd like to mention that if you're working on a special assignment, it's not uncommon to schedule last minute quick check-ins for an issue or a new assignment. That's just very common, and especially in a small rural community where you have very limited capacity, things come up, and I usually roll the Sparker right into that program and have them move on it and act quickly. General responsibilities of the site supervisor including good communication, encouraging and supporting the fellow, and stimulating the fellow's growth. So the way that I like to give back to the community and to the fellows is by stimulating their growth, helping to add to their professional development, giving them real life skills that will further their career, and giving them opportunities to really excel and be challenged. It's very important to provide honest feedback to the fellow when something comes up, but it's also important to ask for feedback. It's a two-way communication, and it's just as important to maybe get the perspective of the fellow as it is as a site supervisor. And then finally, mentorship and professional development. They're here for a reason. They want to serve a community, and they want to have opportunities to experience local government at its finest. But I feel that we also have a duty as site supervisors to really do everything we can to sharpen their professional development and give them opportunities to grow. Professional development best practices include just the knowledge that the relationship between the CivicSpark Fellow and the site supervisor is truly symbiotic. It's important to ask questions. So oftentimes in the beginning of the program, I would approach Lizzy and say, what do you hope to gain by the end of your term? What areas are you most interested in learning about? And what activities within the city are you interested in participating in? Once you know what the goal is for the CivicSpark Fellow, you can really focus and direct them and give them opportunities to not only help you and build your capacity, but also encourage them through participating in activities that they have an interest in. Offers unique opportunities for professional development. It's an opportunity to connect with state organizations and leaders throughout the state. Workshops and meetings, city council meetings. I mean, Lizzy, I invited her to every city council meeting, and I actually encouraged her to speak, and I gave her a couple opportunities to do presentations at city council. But as well as that, there's other board meetings, there's governmental meetings, California Air Resource meetings, staff meetings internally, current council of government. So I really tried to expose her to as many of those opportunities as possible. And then also opportunities, what opportunities can you help your fellow in learning more by perhaps scheduling a conference that they may want to attend and supporting their efforts to obtain certifications or additional educational opportunities during their term as a fellow at your site. This is to continue to ask questions throughout the service year, build upon the fellows' experience, and provide growth opportunities. So we were lucky enough to have Lizzy for 2 years. So by the end of the first term, we knew what she didn't know. And then that was, again, another opportunity to ask her, now that you've had exposure to public outreach, or now that you've had exposure to community development, what opportunities and experiences would you like to expand on? Some of the answers that I got was really the housing and the ADUs. So we really tried to focus her second term in that area. And then also she wanted to attend some professional development conferences, which we obliged to do that. And that's a way in which you can mentor and help your fellow and support them in their goals as well. There's always opportunities for growth, including stakeholder meetings, state official conferences, departmental meetings, workshops, webinars, speaking engagements, and outreach events. In Arvin, we effectively employed our CivicSparker for furthering housing, environmental justice, research, and outreach with stakeholders. In Arvin, Lizzy's focus was on housing and environmental justice outreach because our community has a particulate matter and exposure of PM 2.5 of 98%. Our air is horrible here in this community, and we have a lot of socioeconomic and environmental challenges. So having somebody in a community that is disadvantaged is very helpful for capacity building and to advance climate projects. And because we have those kind of statistics with regards to air quality, we're constantly trying to forward climate projects which benefit the community, such as electrification projects, urban greening projects, urban forestry projects. And I can tell you that our fellows have been very effective in providing support on climate programs and climate action and in environmental justice outreach. And with that, I'm going to turn you over to Mackenzie Bolger. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine, and thanks, Lizzy. I just want to thank Christine for your amazing supervision that you've provided for Lizzy these past 2 years, and what an amazing project partner you've been. And I also just want to pause for a second to reflect on Lizzy's clear expertise in this space as well, and all the experience she's gained through this hands-on project and under your leadership, Christine. I just think this is a great example of a really successful CivicSpark experience where a supervisor gets the support they need and the fellow walks away with really tangible skill sets. So thank you both. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about kind of, what else CivicSpark can provide you as a community that maybe needs additional capacity, and then also highlight a few more projects that our fellows have done in this space in housing. And so as you can see here, we really run the gamut of what we cover and what we can provide support on. We have 100 fellows serving in California each year, and there are definitely a good handful working on affordable housing, but also a lot of the other extremely pressing issues that California is facing. And so we have projects, and I can share out the projects page on our website, but we focus on climate mitigation and adaptation, decarbonization and energy efficiency, water policy management, affordable housing, clearly, sustainable mobility. We do some broadband work, and then a lot of equity, environmental justice work is embedded in each of these projects, but we also do separate projects focused on that as well. Thanks. So over the years, we've done a lot of different work in the affordable housing space, and I'll actually just highlight a few in the next slides from our graduating cohort. They're wrapping up right now. Their last day is August 12th. But we've done a lot of technical assistance support for SB1 and AHSC grants. We've done housing element updates in a variety of counties. We've done community college support for community college students experiencing housing insecurity or homelessness. And I'll actually just talk through a few of the projects that we've had this year. So in addition to support in the city of Arvin, our fellow Jacqueline Taylor worked with the county of Calaveras to do another type of ADU project in rural communities. This one involved putting together an ADU workbook to help identify types of ADUs, funding strategies, vendors, and all of that. We've had in the city of Elk Grove, so another at the city level, this project focused on rental housing equity through a landlord incentive program, which provided bonuses and support for landlords who rent to those with housing choice vouchers or to families experiencing homelessness. Another example is a state and local partnership with Housing and Community Development and a local Council of Governments in Southern California, the Gateway Cities COG. The fellow here worked on a lot of different things, a roadmap to end homelessness in the COG, a housing trust fund, inclusionary housing study, an innovative housing finance study, an ADU calculator, and also did some technical assistance through some workshops and providing review and support on housing elements for different cities in the region. We've had another kind of regional focused initiative in Southern California where fellows placed with the Southern California Association of Governments provided technical assistance to partners in the Regional Early Action Planning Grant Program, provided housing supportive grant application assistance, supported local planning to increase housing in the region through the sub-regional partnership program, and provided a lot of other support around ADUs and zoning ordinances to increase ADU development in the region. And then the last example I'll just give is another one in the San Joaquin Valley, in the Central Valley, which was another at the COG level, which was focused on forming a regional housing trust fund. So supporting and preserving affordable housing. The fellow here completed a feasibility study and a needs assessment, convened a local steering committee, and established an administrative plan for the trust fund. So if any of these projects sound like something you're doing or needing support on, we are still accepting a handful of partners for this next service year, which starts this fall. And in our partners, we really, I think Christine sets the bar really high, but we're looking for partners that can sort of put together and provide a tangible and impactful resiliency project that a fellow can support for 11 months. And then a site supervisor who's also committed to mentoring and supporting the fellow that's placed with them. So if you have questions or would like to talk more about this, my contact information is going to be on the next slide, but I'll also just put in the chat if you'd like to set up a one-on-one call with me. I actually might not be able to put it. I'll put it here and then Haley, maybe you can send it out. But happy to chat with anybody as well. And then I think we have a little bit of time now for some questions. So if anybody has questions, please go ahead and put those in the Q&A. And here's our contact information if you'd like to reach out to any of us specifically.
Because my CivicSpark, fellow term is ending on August 12th, I'm going to go ahead and put an alternate email address that you can use to contact me, but I'm happy to answer any questions about CivicSpark and my experience.
Cool. Well, while we're waiting for a few questions to come in, I'll just ask one question that I had. So a lot of the housing programs that fellows support really focus regionally. And I know you guys were focused on the city specifically. How is Arvin involved and participating in regional initiatives, perhaps with the county, other cities, or other unincorporated communities in the area?
Yeah, I can go into that a little bit. The San Joaquin Valley REAP program I mentioned during my presentation is definitely a key contact and collaborative space that's valley-wide, regional-wide, providing a number of people from all over the valley, local government, COGS, to come together and talk about housing issues. So like large valley-wide, I don't know if you all can still hear me. My Zoom seemed to pop away.
We can hear you still. Yeah, your video's frozen, but we can hear you.
I'll keep talking then. But regional-wide, that's a great opportunity. We have been working with our COG for additional funding, technical assistance support on our housing element. And then we also, I know Christine can talk about this, are in a number of planning grant phases for some affordable housing development. So we're also working with Kern Community College for a planning grant for the Transformative Climate Communities, which is a program of the Strategic Growth Council that provides a lot of funding for affordable housing, along with other like sustainability and mobility measures too. I don't know if you have anything to add.
So yeah, the TCC program is a behemoth of a grant. It probably takes about 4 or 5 months to write, and that's with a team. So we have always wanted to go after a very large affordable housing project, but we didn't have the capacity. So now we've joined up with Kern Community College District as one of our main partners, Dolores Huerta Foundation, Cesar Chavez Foundation, some scientific groups who really focus on energy reduction and climate, and a couple of developers, and we're going to go after a TCC grant. Right now we have an application in for a planning grant. We'll spend the next year planning, and then after that we intend to crush it in the following year. But it takes a lot of planning and a lot of preparation and a lot of capacity. So it's something that you really need to have great collaborative efforts with your community, your stakeholders, and the team that's going to work together. And it will be a very difficult process, but at the end, I suspect it will be very rewarding as well. And then also too, I really feel like as a city staff member, you do have the ability to influence government, and you do have the ability to participate. And I think that's true with the fellows as well. It's getting in early on programs. So when we get these emails coming in from state organizations such as the Strategic Growth Council or California Department of Housing or California Department of State Parks, those early introduction meetings for workshops are critical, because that is usually prior to programs being initiated. And that's your opportunity to provide feedback and effectively change the outcome of the guidelines and the programs that they're developing. And I never want to miss an opportunity to do that, because we know what our community needs more than anybody else would. And the state officials don't necessarily understand the plight of these small DAC communities. So anytime an email comes your way with an opportunity to communicate with state and governmental entities, those are opportunities to challenge the status quo and make real changes that will help communities. So that's a way in which you can absolutely have an impact. I mean, when the TCC program was first being developed many years ago, I participated in all those workshops. And as a result, those guidelines have been impacted by the input that we put in. So really important, the communication with these state entities and regional entities, and really, you know, always looking at every program that you're facilitating as a potential program to change the entire region, to change the state of California, and to change the future for our community as a whole. So I always look at it that way, and it's always good to have that outlook, because you really can make a huge difference, not only in your community, but on a regional level. And I hope that answers your question. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Christine, for providing that broader perspective. We have a couple questions coming in. The first one from Pierre Rivas. How are you addressing the pressures to convert ADUs from long-term to short-term rentals?
I can answer that. I I know my Zoom might still, my video might still be down, but I'm here. So the City of Arvin is, again, that rural city. We are not expecting that too much to be a problem, but that's something that our consultants are aware of, and that we are working with them to kind of form maybe a piece in the ADU ordinance. But as of right now, that's not a top concern. Just given like our household size and knowing households can be overcrowded, we more so want to provide opportunities for like multi-generational family options. But knowing that those ones will be rented, it's probably not going to be a lot of short-term rentals versus long-term, more long-term, at least 6 months to a year. We are a farm working community, so the more, if our ADUs are used for short-term rentals for farm workers, I still see that as a benefit to the community as well. In terms of short-term rentals of tourists, that's not necessarily a problem our city might have, but that is something to consider for other jurisdictions. And that can be something, working with the consultants, having something in writing, but really we just want to reduce as many barriers as possible at this point to the construction of ADUs.
Great, thank you, Lizzy. Christine, anything to add there?
This is a community that's asking, I think they would have to put it in their ordinance that, 50% of the ADUs that are built have to be for long-term rentals, and the other half can be for tourists, or limiting the scope at which, I could see that if they're trying to encourage affordable housing and then people want to come in because they want to build Airbnbs and they're going to make more profit on it that way, I could see how that could be a challenge and a burden. But I think it's going to come down to your own municipal code or your own ordinances that say something like, a certain percentage have to be for long-term rentals, a certain percentage can be used for travel, and or limiting the number of permits you give out specifically for, Airbnbs, with no limit on long-term rentals. And I think that's all to communicate with the state about HCD and see how they would handle it, because they want to do things at forward housing as much as possible in ADU. So look to guidance from the state representatives as well.
Great, thank you. Cool, so we got another question from Jose Flores, and I think I can answer this one fairly quickly. So Jose is with a nonprofit that focuses on affordable housing and water access and waste and infrastructure. You guys are doing the most. Nonprofits can apply to be a host agency. If we were interested in hosting a fellow, would the project need to connect more closely with building capacity for a specific local government, or would it be okay to build capacity for a nonprofit at the organizational level? So actually we are starting to pivot to be able to build capacity for nonprofit organizations, and you wouldn't necessarily need to have that external local government partnership in place. I'd want to hear a little bit more about what the fellow would be doing, and maybe we can talk a little bit offline as well. I'll put my email here, even though you probably have it from the slides, and we can chat more. Cool. Any other questions? We probably have time for one or two more. So I'll ask one. What recommendations do you have for a city just starting out with ADU planning?
I would say a really deep dive into the program design and the research and review. Looking at model cities and comparable cities is definitely going to be key. So cities that are similar size, cities in similar areas as well. And then understanding your demographics of the community that you're hoping to tailor the ADU program to. So that's what I would say. You can start working. There is a number of regional agencies COGs and county governments that are getting a lot more experience and are updating their ADU ordinances and seeing how you can partner with them or any resources that they might have. And I think designating a staff member to be, the local ADU expert, with everybody having some type of knowledge and capacity is going to be definitely key too. So assigning, roles, and then really going into what's going to be the best fit. So if the issue is worrying about short-term rentals, what are different programs that other cities have placed to combat against short-term rentals for their ADUs? And I know there are a couple cities doing that. I don't know the names off the top of my head, but I remember my research and review phase reading and learning about that too. So that would be my general recommendation.
Great, thanks. Christine, anything you want to add to that?
No, not really. Thank you.
Great.
Well, thanks everybody. Thanks Christine, Lizzie, and Mackenzie. This all information is really great. I wanted to let everyone who is on the call know that this is part of an event series. We have another one coming up in October that'll be on small scale green infrastructure. And also we have another event series going on currently sponsored by Meta that is around housing issues. We recently had a webinar on building housing in commercial corridors, and that recording is available on our website in our resource library. Also, we have another one coming up pretty shortly on missing middle housing. So if that's of interest, keep an eye out for that. And we will be sending out the recording of this along with a survey, very quick, just to get some feedback and help us make these events better going forward. And again, encourage you to take a look at civicwell.org/membership and become a member. We have a lot of great benefits, like events like this. So thank you again so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.